podcast with David Icke. We're down here on the Isle of Wight today. Crimes of the Illuminati is the subject, and we're going to be going over a range of questions. Now, back in 2003, 2004, I was upstairs in the maximum security Madison Street Jail, Phoenix, Arizona, locked down, and a lifer on the run comes right up to my door and shoves a book under the door, says, "Have you heard of David Icke? You need to read this." And here's the book that I read. Alice in Wonderland just blew my mind, shook up the foundation of my belief system. David's got numerous books out now, huge YouTube channel. All the links to all his books and YouTube channel will be in the description box below this video. So we're going to start with a question that's quite topical right now. Thanks for being on, David.
No problem.
Cheers. Yeah.
No problem.
Julian Assange, why is he being targeted and what's in store?
Well, I've spent 30 years connecting dots. And what you learn is nothing happens in isolation. To understand the true nature of an individual action, an individual situation, you have to understand what it's connected to, because it's not a pixel, there's a picture there and you just have to find it. And I have this phrase I use: know the outcome and you'll see the journey. If you know where we're being taken, then the steps and the changes and the events that are leading to that outcome become very clear. See, I can see where this is going. But if you don't know the outcome, then those same happenings appear to be completely random and have no pattern. So what is going on? Oh, it's just this Assange bloke. He's been arrested for running away to the Ecuadorian embassy, and he was doing something the Americans don't like, so they want to extradite him and all that stuff. And it seems to be a single event. It's not. If we go back to know the outcome and you'll see the journey. What is the outcome? The outcome that we're being taken to, which brings in so many other dots of topical current interest and happening, is to a position where no one will ever see anything or hear anything that is not officially approved. That's the goal. Now, what we're seeing is the movement towards that. And of course, the Silicon Valley hysteria of censorship is taking us towards that so fast, day after day after day, whereby anything outside of the official narrative is now hate speech, fake news, and any other label that they come up with, and there'll be many others. And of course, within that concept of only seeing and hearing whatever the authority wants you to see and hear, we then see why freedom of speech in general is being targeted. And everywhere you look, it's being targeted. Because if freedom of speech survives in any form, they can never reach the point where they can control everything that people see and hear, because free speech can challenge it. So that's why free speech is being targeted on the scale it is. So then you look at what Assange has done with WikiLeaks. First of all, he has, through that organization, revealed through leaked documents, emails, etc., the truth that some of us have been putting out for a long time is that the American government would give psychopaths a bad name. They'd probably sue for defamation of character. And we've seen civilians in the Middle East shot for a bit of fun, basically, on camera. We have seen how politicians have said one thing to our face, and something very different was going on in the shadows. So if we, again, go back to this concept of controlling everything that people see and hear, the last thing they want is for someone like WikiLeaks and Assange to reveal what they absolutely don't want people to see and hear, which is what they're really doing. So how do you stop that? Well, you can censor, yes, up to a point, but you've also got to discourage anyone else who would have in mind doing anything like the same. So this is an old trick, an old technique. You target someone, usually an individual, and you make an example of them. You target them in an extreme, over-the-top, psychopathic way, because what you're doing is you're not just targeting Assange. You're saying to anyone else that might think of doing the same, this is what happens when you take us on. And so there's many elements of what the old Assange story is, but that is absolutely prime, which is terrifying anyone else going down the same road. And we see this same principle with freedom of speech. What you do, you don't just censor, you target people talking in ways that the system doesn't want people to hear or accept, with endless abuse, so that people then start to come into the most insidious, the most fundamental of censorship, which is self-censorship. Instead of someone saying something and there be some kind of debate about it, it's just never said. And what does that mean? Increasingly, as more and more people say, well, I better not say that because what are the consequences, which is what people are doing now, you're step by step getting closer to a point where people only see and hear what the authorities want us to see and hear. And when my next book comes out, which is a big update on Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center disaster, it's called The Trigger. It's coming out on September the 11th, which might give you an idea what's a great chunk of it's about, but it's not all about that. They will see that actually I don't give a shit what they do to me, throw at me, abuse me with. I couldn't care less. And that's the energy we need, because as long as people keep thinking consequences, what are the consequences for me of doing this or saying this? And people think, oh, the consequences, they're too much for me, I don't want that. We're walking down the road to complete silence of anything outside the official narrative. And that's very dangerous, and we must not bow to that.
So they've made an example out of Assange. This has been going on for time immemorial, like the death of Socrates, the gadfly.
Yep.
Trump said, I love WikiLeaks. And now Trump and the US are trying to get Assange extradited, could possibly serve a life sentence in America.
Yeah.
How does Trump reconcile that? And what do you think will happen to Assange if he ends up in the States?
Well, they won't throw the book at him. They'll throw the library at him, and most of it will be made up. And the thing about it, too, is crucial to destroying freedom of speech and allowing things like that to happen, is to have a media that's not only owned by the cabal that's ultimately behind all this, because you control information, you control perception, you control behavior, you control human society. It all comes from information. That's the start of that sequence. So this is why they want to control information everywhere, totally. But it's not just that the media is overwhelmingly owned by these people. It's that what people bravely call themselves journalists, who actually have the nerve, the audacity to put journalist on their tax form, they have backbones that start vibrating at the very thought of taking on the system. And so instead of standing up in unity for their own freedom of speech, which is obviously all tied in to what they're doing to Assange, what they're doing to him could equally be applied to any news organization or any journalist, because proper journalists basically do the same. They uncover what the the authorities don't want uncovered. That's the real foundation of a journalist, telling the public what the public wouldn't otherwise hear. Instead, we have a journalistic profession that tells the public what the system and the authorities want them to hear, which is the very inversion of journalism. But even from that perspective, the extreme of potential consequences for mainstream journalism, what survives of it, of what they're doing to Assange, even that has not rallied them to stand up and say, we're not having this. Because in the end, journalism, and I worked in journalism, mainstream journalism for a long time, in newspapers and radio and television. In the end, what motivates most journalists is not the pursuit of truth and the exposure of deceit and the abuse of power. It is, I've got a mortgage to pay. That's the motivation. So it's like, oh, well, if I cross the line, I might lose my job and well, you know, I've got a mortgage to pay. But what these journalists don't realize is while their backbones vibrate and they sit pondering over the next mortgage payment, their very profession is being dismantled. And what is happening to Assange is part of that dismantling of that profession. We are, I saw some figures the other day about the number of journalists who are losing their jobs around the world because all the information is now being put onto the internet. Newspapers are going out of business. Television companies are losing. If you just take that off, somebody's trying to call me. Newspapers are going out of business. The television stations are vastly losing audiences, and it's moving on to the internet. It's moving on the internet systematically for a very simple reason. Once you get information on the internet, you can algorithmically censor it without any human input once the codes are in there. That's what it's being done for. Why have they created monopolistic organizations like Google with the search engine and Facebook and these others to be the very focus of the communication of information? Because that's the way they're going to control it totally. You know, the algorithms that don't just delete a post when it's posted, but stop it being posted. That's where it's very close to going. And so you put all this together, and Assange is a very significant element in all that. And the journalists look on, and they say, "I've got to pay my mortgage on Thursday." Truth? Got to pay my mortgage on Thursday, and that's how it goes. That's how it goes. And unfortunately, they're going to reap the whirlwind. Many already are.
This ties into the next question then. The jelly-spined journalists who are vibrating right now are pushing for war with Iran. Why does the US want war with Iran so much?
Well, another question would be, how come I predicted war with Iran, best part of 2 decades ago?
I read that, and I saw it on your videos. You talked about that general who came back and talked about which ones we're going to invade next.
It's very simple. Yeah. Again, you know, we're not looking at dots. We're looking at pictures. Not looking at pixels. We're looking at patterns. And so, the very close attack on Iran, which I would say Trump pulled back on at the very last minute, not for kind of altruistic reasons towards Iranians, but because it was pointed out to him that by those that are not pushing him to war, that if he does go to war with Iran, he's got no chance of winning the next election because he will absolutely have lost the support of vast numbers of people that voted for Trump in 2016 simply because he was saying, we're going to stop having these wars, and we're going to stop intervening in other countries' affairs. People wanted that. So a lot of his support came from that. And I think at the last minute, a few voices said to him, if you do this, you'll not win the next election. So he pulled back at the last minute. And what these war hawks around him are, like John Bolton, who's never seen a country he didn't want to bomb. He's a national security advisor. He's just an Israel placeman. He was placed into power by a guy called Sheldon Adelson, who's an American-Israeli Las Vegas casino magnate, an Israeli media owner, who is Trump's biggest funder and the Republican Party's biggest funder. He was the one that put Bolton in. And Bolton, if we take it back, was part of a group called the Project for the New American Century, which was created in the 1990s specifically to target a number of countries for a regime change in the Middle East. And in September 2000, the year before 9/11, they produced a document which they called the New American Century. If it was true, really accurate, they'd have called it the New Israeli Century, because it was an Israeli organization. And what then happened was that they published this document and they listed a series of countries in September 2000 they wanted to regime change. And they were Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, North Korea, leading to regime change in China. And so you saw Boy Bush and his poodle, Blair, say his poodle, the American poodle, Blair. They then lied to pick off the first one, Iraq. They then went away. I mean, Blair was officially, I mean, it's a laugh, but he was officially a Labour Party prime minister. Bush was a Republican president. And in came a Democrat president called Obama and a conservative prime minister called David Cameron. So they're not going to be the same, are they? Because they're in different parties. Crikey. Well, I wonder what they're going to do. They targeted Libya and removed Gaddafi, according to the Project for the New American Century list of September 2000. And then they started the process of this manufactured civil war in Syria, which has created mayhem in Syria. And now they went and in came Mr. Maverick, Mr. Swamp Drainer, Donald Trump, and he was minutes away from attacking Iran. And what they're going to keep doing, these war hawks, is they're going to keep prodding him with events they're going to create and blame on Iran. So eventually he says, okay, then. That's the idea. Whether he'll keep his situation. If you take just take the thing out the back, you know, out there, then it won't ring again. Yeah, it's Donald Trump. He hasn't got me with a tweet, so he's tried the phone. Chill out, Don. Just drain the swamp, mate, will you? The one you've been swimming in all your life. Anyway, so this list, when Trump came in, was clearly next going to be Iran, which is being ticked off. And that's why I put a meme on the internet when he was elected in 2016. And it says, keyword of the Trump administration, Iran, which, as I put at the bottom, which means Russia and China, who would support Iran in that situation. And so then you look at what allowed them to start this list off? What allowed them to start focusing on the Middle East to justify these regime changes? And it was an attack on September the 11th, 2001. And in this document of September 2000, it says, talking about the regime changes they demand and how they would be brought about, that this process of transformation, they say, quote, meaning the regime changes in the Middle East, would be necessarily slow, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. And 1 year to the month after that document was published, and 9 months after the people that wrote it came to power with Bush, your Cheneys, your Rumsfelds, your Wolfowitz, your Dov Zakheims, who controlled the whole Pentagon budget, etc., and many others, they had what Bush called at the time America's Pearl Harbor of the 21st century. And if anyone thinks that's a coincidence, I've got some wonderful seafront property in the Midwest they might like to look at. Sight unseen, of course, because you'll probably buy it if you believe that was a coincidence. And so predicting the future, which my books have done in great numbers across great subjects, is not some sitting in a quiet room pulling it out of the ether. If you know what the outcome is desired to be, then predicting the stepping stones to that outcome is absolutely straightforward. The idea of doing it is to alert people, not to say, look, see, I knew this, I knew that, look, aren't I great? It's to say, look, if I knew about this in the 1990s and 20 years ago and 10 years ago, it ain't random, is it? It's not random. It's not something that's just happening. It's a pattern. It's being made to happen. It's an agenda. And the idea is to wake people up to the fact that they are looking at an agenda for mass human global control. And it's being perpetuated by a level of psychopathy that just almost beggars belief. You see, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they judge what these people will do by what they would do. You say to most people, would you create 9/11, blame it on 19 Arab hijackers who somehow managed to manifest the ability to fly big commercial jets, having been absolutely useless, according to their flight instructors, on one-engine Cessnas. One guy, Hani Hanjour, who was supposed to have done an amazing 270-degree turn to hit the Pentagon, was banned from hiring a one-engine plane 6 weeks earlier because he was frickin' useless. Right? It's madness. But it's like the whole Nazi thing. If you keep repeating the same story over and over again, people will eventually believe it. But we're not dealing with the emotional and compassionate nature of so many people. We're dealing with psychopaths. So don't judge what they would do by what you would do. They would not only kill nearly 3,000 people on 9/11 to justify killing and maiming millions in the Middle East as a result. They would get off on it. These people are insane. And we need to take the world back from them before their insane outcome becomes human life.
Having read David's books for 15 years now, I can confirm everything that he writes does come true eventually. And one of the things that horror struck me reading your earlier books was like the depleted uranium, the cluster bombs. You had photos in your books of the effects. And I read a statistic recently that since these wars in the Middle East have happened, I don't know, 3 to 5 million people have died. Half of them, women and children, collateral damage. So you're talking about psychopathy.
Yeah, well, you're talking about satanic psychopaths because, you know, I write about so many subjects, but I keep emphasizing they all connect. People say to me, you see conspiracies everywhere. Well, conspiracies are everywhere. If you look at the dictionary definition of 2 or more people conspiring to bring about an end, usually illegal. But I'm not talking about conspiracies everywhere. I'm talking about one conspiracy with multiple faces, which is a different thing. So when during the 90s I was starting to investigate some of these people, in different countries, invariably you would end up with either pedophilia or Satanism, and usually both, because they are connected. And so, hold on, this is a person who would sacrifice a child, literally on an altar. And I'm talking some of the most famous people in the world here. So those same people who have such deleted lack of empathy, deleted compassion, that they can watch a child in terror as the ritual builds up to the point where they kill the child.